So this headline right here really just got me going. Working from home causes surge in security breaches. Staff, quote, oblivious to best practices. So I actually dug into this, and here's what they're referencing. You'll see in the dark blue. 44% did not provide cybersecurity training that focused on potential threats of working from home. So with that, my mind has officially exploded, hence why I'm actually making this presentation. This is cybersecurity awareness training really for CPA firm partners. Now, I'm not going to be getting into all of the various threats, right? That would be true just security awareness training. This was really built more for the partners out there at these CPA firms to understand why cybersecurity training is a good idea. So let's go ahead and jump into it. This is the path. Today we're going to be talking about the practical side, the practical reasons why cybersecurity awareness training is such a good idea for your firm. Second is going to be federal and state requirements. So you may be legally obligated to actually be providing this anyways. And third, I'm going to provide some solutions for you. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, first off, remote work has increased the risks. That is really a totally uncontroversial statement. No matter what you read out there, this really just has happened. Why is that? Well, direct oversight isn't always possible. So before, when you were going into the office and maybe a staff member would come up to you and they'd say, hey, I got this email from you. Is this legit or not? You don't have that direct oversight anymore if they're working remotely. Second, it's very much more difficult to run it by IT. So previously, hey, you could just have the IT guy come to your office, or you could just give them a call and say, hey, I got this email. Does this look legit to you? They could go yes or no. Maybe you could, run it by their email system. But nowadays, people are working different hours. They're working in different places. Maybe you're going to have time zone issues now, or people are working odd hours, but still fulfilling their, daily work requirement, as it were. So you can't always run it by IT. And then second, you can't always just check with the sender. So previously, one of our recommendations was, hey, you get this random email. Maybe it sounds great. Give them a call and just ask them, hey, did you mean to send this to me? And these are very, very provocative. It could be, hey, my last accountant retired. He recommended I reach out to you. Here is an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of information on it. Let me know if you can help. Well, previously, maybe you could just call that business and ask for that person. But now you don't know who you're going to be talking to, and maybe you call that business and everybody else is working remotely. So that's going to make it more difficult. Second, when you have remote breaches here, it's just more damaging and more costly to actually deal with that, because now your network is even bigger. Maybe we have to go run forensics on a personal device. We're not sure if we can do that. There's some legal questions there. So, remote breaches, more costly, more damaging. And finally, you don't really have control over those personal home networks. So if you're not reaching out to those staff members and providing those best practices on working from home, you're really putting your network and your business at risk. All right, next is you just have a larger footprint to be attacked. So previously, the best analogy here is you had your castle and you had your drawbridge and you had your moat, and you could defend that castle. Well, now it's like you're trying to defend all these doors, like you have a giant apartment complex, and each one of those doors could actually lead into all of the latest and greatest, all that PII inside your firm, and that could be really damaging. So, you just have more devices accessing your network. Do you even know what those devices are that are allowed or not allowed to access your network? It makes it harder for you to know what's a legitimate request for information on your network and what is not a legitimate request. And there's just a much higher probability that all of this new technology that you've put out into the world, that it's just not secured appropriately. There could be some administrative password secured somewhere. There could be all types of issues where previously that legacy technology you had the ability to really work out those kinks and figure out what those issues were. But as the number of COVID-related breaches is increasing, everybody's working from home, the hackers are having a field day, the time you have to actually fix those issues, much, much less. All right, another practical concern, clients leave post-breach. So you'll see here, this is from the Ponymon Institute. I went back and looked at every single abnormal client churn turnover rate from 2014 to 2019. And you'll see there the second column, vertical, that's financial services institutions. So, that could be CPA firms, it could be a mortgage brokerage, it could be, insurance companies, insurance brokerages, or insurance agencies, all falls under that financial services vertical. And you'll see there that, clients are getting annoyed and it looks like they're leaving again. So you want to try and avoid that. On top of that, this is the latest and greatest from the IRS W-2 projections. It looks like it's going to be a rough decade for CPA firms just in terms of W-2s and trying to work with that information. So the last thing you want to do is go into this harder environment where there's just going to be fewer clients potentially to serve, but then you have a breach and now clients are going to leave anyways. We all know that it's much easier to retain a client than it is to get a new client. So you don't want to just shoot yourself in the foot from the beginning by not providing the appropriate training necessary for staff. And of course, there's that long-term damage to brand identity. So this was a recent article here. 1 in 4 Americans just won't do business with a company that's been breached. The last thing you want is for somebody to, do an internet search for your business or Google for your business, and the web page pops up, and then hey, all of a sudden, number 1 is going to be your business web page, and then number 2 is a breach notification letter or a story in the local news where your firm has been breached. Just not good business. So don't make it harder than necessary to attract new clients. All right, let's talk about this in-house security awareness training. I've seen quite a lot of these. Dan and I deal with well over 350 CPA firms. I've seen varying degrees of this, but it is quite hit or miss, I would say. So as leaders, we are setting the example for our people. We are telling our people what is a priority, what is not a priority. So if it's just, hey, the once a month Zoom call with the standard, don't click on the wrong thing, ask a question if something's wrong, that's really not going to cut it. Both from a technical standpoint, there's a larger number of risks out there than most people are probably aware of, and they need to be aware of those. But 2, if we're treating security awareness on the cyber front as sort of this afterthought, right? Our people are going to see, oh, well, it's not really a priority for the partners. It's not going to be a priority for me. I'm going to spend my time doing something else. And that could really shoot you in the foot. And the last really point here is it actually just helps us stay up to speed as well. There are, just numerous types of scams out there, and they're changing all the time. They're rapidly evolving. So I just ask you, can you tell the difference between phishing, vishing, whaling, and smishing? If you don't know the answer to that question, I would say now is the time you need to invest really in some cybersecurity awareness training for both yourself and your staff. It's just good for us as leaders to not only be aware of what those issues are, so we can set those priorities for our people, but also if our people come to us and they're unsure, we as leaders need to have the requisite knowledge to understand what those risks are. All right, let's talk about the legal side here. I think a lot of people miss this. There's both a federal, so that's Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, Cybersecurity Framework, the CFS, and the FTC. I'm going to be delving into that, as well as some of the state level requirements that I think a lot of firms are missing, and this really could come back to bite you quite hard. The fines are quite substantial if you're not getting this right. These all deal with employee training. All right, so here it is, 2018 tax tip from the IRS. They said, quote, the IRS may treat a violation of the FTC Safeguards Rule as a violation of IRS Revenue Procedure 2007-40. So the immediate question I always get when I present this information is, what the hell is the FTC Safeguards Rule, and what does this IRS Revenue Procedure actually say? Well, here is the Revenue Procedure 2007-40. So essentially, this just sets up the rules for participating as an e-file provider. And it says that the procedure revises the previous procedure by providing for denial of application or revocation of an authorized e-file provider participation in IRS e-files. So essentially they're saying they have the right, if you've been breached, to actually just revoke your e-file access. Now, of course, I'm an insurance broker. I'm not a CPA firm, but I would imagine, and having spoken to a good number of CPA firm partners, that is probably not something that you want to have occur to your business. Also, IRS Publication 1345, Handbook for Authorized IRS e-file Providers. So this essentially says, hey, you could face sanctions from the FTC if you don't have the right security program, and you could face penalties under 7216 and 6713. I'm just going to assume that everybody listening to this knows 7216 and 6713. And let's get to that the FTC Safeguards Rule. What is that? Well, this really comes from the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and it requires a number of different things. So first, it requires that you keep your information secure. That's your customer information. And you also have to have safeguards in place for your firm, your affiliates, and your service providers. So in other words, you have to have reasonable cybersecurity safeguards in place. Now, the question is always, what does reasonable cybersecurity safeguards actually mean? The word reasonable is actually a legal term. So let's just go ahead and jump into what that actually means. So the way that the FTC, so that would be the federal level agency most likely to come after a business following a breach, they measure reasonableness based on the NIST cybersecurity framework that I mentioned earlier. What does that framework actually say? Well, here's the relevant part. So this is awareness and training, so the leftmost column, and it says personnel and partners are provided cybersecurity awareness education and are trained to perform their cybersecurity related duties and responsibilities consistent with related policies, procedures, and agreements. The middle column there, you'll see how it starts to break it down. In the left column, those are going to be all the references. So you'll see, if you look at like the top line of every box there, CIS CSC 17, and that's repeated every single time. So what does that actually say? Well, if you actually go into it, here it is. This is from the CIS 20, and you'll see implement a security awareness and training program. Now, the implementation groups, those colored dots on the right-hand side, those essentially have to do with different sizes of business. I believe roughly green is like a small business. 2, so that would be, like say a local CPA firm. 2 would be more of a regional CPA firm. 3 is going to be, like the nationwide top 20, top 100 type firms. But you'll see that there's a lot more to this than you would probably imagine. So let's just go with the small guys, the green dots. Implement a security awareness program. Train workforce on secure authentication. Train workforce on identifying social engineering attacks. Train workforce on sensitive data handling. Train workforce on causes of unintentional data exposure. And training them on identifying and reporting incidents. All of these things should be built into a good cybersecurity awareness training program. All of these things, you could argue, are actually legally required that you as a CPA firm be doing. If you face an investigation from a federal agency, most likely it's going to be from the FTC, and they're going to be looking at the NIST cybersecurity framework, and these are their references. They're going to be checking off the boxes to see if you did this or not. Now, if you're doing just the standard in-firm, IT guy once a month, go up in front of the group there, it's going to be very hard to actually validate that you were doing all of these things. Now, me personally, if I had to face some type of regulatory investigation, I would want some type of certification, some type of backup. I would want to be able to look towards the security company that's providing those certifications, right? That's saying, hey, these people finished these modules. We had a plan. It just happens that the plan was overcome, not we didn't do anything. We didn't do those reasonable steps necessary before a breach occurred. And what happens if the FTC brings an action against you? It is painful beyond measure, and let's talk about that. So here we go. This is an FTC Data Security Enforcement Action. Obviously, I don't want you to read all of those little words there. You probably can't even read them on your screen. The important parts I actually highlighted for you. Those are all the additional steps that this one business now has to take. So you can see it's quite extensive. So let's break down what's generally in those FTC enforcement actions. Creating a written information security plan. Essentially, you have to create a chief information security officer, risk assessments, document retention and destruction, code reviews, pen testing, input validations, network segmentation, IPDS implementation, file integrity monitoring tools, data loss prevention tools, location upload restrictions, encryption of PII, vulnerability testing, service provider selection, yearly certification of the FTC, compliance reports, accounting record issues, and employee training. Now, I would say that keep this in mind. This is for the next 20 years if this comes down your way. So these are all the things that you may have to do circumstantially, annually, biannually as well. you really don't want to do this, I'd highly recommend really take a hard look at that security awareness training. You don't want the government breathing down your neck for the next 20 years with you having to do all sorts of certifications and compliance issues. Arguably, these are all things that you probably should be doing or you need to take a hard look at doing anyways, depending upon the size of your firm. But at the very least, employee training, very, very cost effective, easy to implement, and that really could save your bacon there. Let's talk about those state level requirements. So there are, quote, reasonable cybersecurity requirements in all of these states. Now, this is a common misconception, so I'll cover it right here. You have to comply with the breach notification laws, right? That's where this reasonable cybersecurity requirement comes from, not based upon where your business resides, but where your clients are residents of. So let's say you have a bunch of, let's just say like you have a military base, for example, next to your firm, and you're doing tax returns from all over the country. Well, surprise, you have to deal with all of these rules. Now, arguably, I would say a formalized cybersecurity awareness training program, that easily falls under reasonable. That's not the, $10,000 a year penetration testing bill. It's very, very affordable. I think it would be very, very difficult to tell a state level AG or any other state level regulator that, a formalized security awareness training program just wasn't in the cards for you. And there's also specific requirements found both. This is just two examples here in Massachusetts and New York. So let's go ahead and jump into those. So you'll see here that I referenced 201 CMR 17. This is standards for protection of personal information of residents of the Commonwealth. Now, obviously, I'd urge everybody, if you fall into this statute, read the entire thing, seek legal counsel. However, the pertinent part here, as we scroll down, computer system security requirements. Every person that owns or licenses personal information about a resident. So once again, if you have any clients that are residents of the state of Massachusetts, it says you shall have the following elements. And you'll notice there's quite a lot going on there. The pertinent part to this presentation is education and training of employees on the proper use of this computer security system and the importance of personal information security. So you'll see it right there. You have to have a security awareness training program. Let's go ahead and jump over to the New York SHIELD Act, which is fairly new. So this here is the New York SHIELD Act. Let's make that a little bit bigger. All right, so scrolling down, you will see this act shall be known and be cited by as the Stop Hacks and Improve Electronic Data Security Act, SHIELD Act. Scrolling further down, you will see right here, reasonable cybersecurity requirements. Any person or business that owns or licenses computerized data, which includes private information of a resident of New York. So once again, if you have a New York resident as a client, not necessarily your business resides in New York, you shall be deemed to be in compliance with the subdivision if you are a compliant regulated entity as defined in subdivision 1, blah, blah, blah. Going down here, lines 25, 26. Trains and manages employees in the security program practices and procedures. So once again, a formalized cybersecurity awareness training program. So there you see it, both state and federal. It looks like CPA firms need to have, a truly formalized cybersecurity awareness training program. So let's talk about the recap. Your business could and should be safer, I would argue. Don't think of this as a cost. It's really an investment in your current and future business. So going back to the previous part of that presentation, it's, hey, we don't want to make it harder to attract new clients. We know we're going into a difficult environment here according to the IRS. We don't want it to make it harder to attract new clients. We don't want clients leaving following a breach. And we don't want to make it harder just for clients to come into our office to even start that conversation. And then, of course, it's likely a legal requirement that you be doing this. So what are the solutions to all this? Let's jump into part 3 here. So obviously periodic video training, I'm a big fan. Phishing simulation tools, ransomware trials, InfoSec coaching, also generally part of these. Deep web monitoring, highly, highly effective there. Generally what that gets into is if you have a username or a password that's somehow on the deep web or the dark web, very advantageous for you to have a service that would then notify you that, let's say, that username and password is up for sale somewhere, so that you can go in and revoke that access, change that password, provide any sort of remedial action you need to that employee, to that staff member. Try and figure out where that came from. So you want to try and avoid the breach as much as possible. And of course, have strong passwords, also inside my book there. If you're a Cameco policyholder, they actually have a formalized relationship with this company called Hailbytes, run by Dave McHale. Great guy. He is providing cybersecurity awareness training and a free dark web scan for Cameco users. So highly recommend that you jump over to that. If you're not a Cameco employee, Cameco employee. If you're not a Cameco policyholder, there's a number of different services out there. If you go to Hailbytes, you can use discount code CPL Brokers with an S at the end there. CPL Brokers, get your discount code. But at the very least, just make sure that you're using something there. If you enjoyed this presentation, this is actually a copy of my book. You can download it here, cplbrokers.com/book1. There's testimonials on the side there from Dr. Sean Stein-Smith, Byron Patrick, and Garrett Wagner. With that, if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Here to assist you anytime. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know if I missed something. And with that, I hope everybody stays safe.